Alright, this is the tutorial for version 0.1 of the 3D character creator texture system. And right here in Unity I have a empty scene. First thing you want to do is probably go to the documentation folder and get that open. I already have it open here. And just go through here to the initial setup. I've got what it is and how to use. So on the initial setup, the first thing you want to do is import the Blit Manager prefab and then bring your character in. So for the demo, we will use the demo character, but first I'm going to go to the prefab folder and bring in the Blit Manager, and then I'm going to go to the models folder and bring in the human example and make them turn over here towards the camera. Luckily we got the camera covering up the sensitive parts here, but the Blit Manager is where you start, and you're going to need to assign a base texture before you get started. Over here in the documentation, that is the first step, is make sure your array size is set to 0, and then we need to set a base texture and the final material. The base texture is just your character's base skin texture. Essentially in a character creator it would be a brand new character without any clothes on them. Your underwear layer may or may not be optional depending on how you set this up. But over here in the Blit Manager, we want to make sure that a base texture is assigned. We can't do any editing until we know what the dimensions of this image are. So go ahead and get your base UV map, your base texture assigned to the Blit Manager, and then the final material. Now the final material is just any material you want to use. This is just the Unity standard shader, and the important part is that this Blit Manager script is going to assign the render texture. Now the render texture is only calculated whenever you tell it to, so it calculates the texture one time, and after that the render texture works performance-wise just like a regular texture 2D would. So you don't, at first we thought we may have performance issues by using these render textures, but that's not the case. It's basically just a texture 2D that, instead of being saved to the hard drive, is being stored in memory. Alright, so we've assigned a material that we want to use for the character, and we've assigned the base texture, and now we're ready to go ahead and get started. You can expand the blit areas, make sure that it's set to 0. You could try to predefine some and put these values in, but the whole reason for the blit editor is for assigning these values. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure it's set to 0 and then click open the blit area editor. And switching over the documentation, make sure that we're following along. At this point it's going to explain about the editor window, so let's take a look at that. Here of course is your main texture, and right now we need to create a new area. So this X and Y value defines the size of the new area that you're going to create, and so I'll say a 256 by 320 right here, and say create new area. Now we have this 320 high and 256 wide area, and I know that matches up with my character's texture. Here's the character's texture with UV map, and we could see this selection with an F8 to bring up the info, and I see that it's 256 wide by 320 high. So the head area for my character is 256 by 320. That's why we've gone ahead and made that matching size, and as we move it around we can see the values updating over here, and I need to align it exactly how it would be lined up in Photoshop right here. There's another 256 by 320 area. I'm going to create that and move it right here. And you can switch between your areas. There's a highlight to show you, and it also highlights them here. You can select them by clicking on their name or in this gray box area. And you can also give them a color tint, so that just lets you kind of see which differentiate between the different layers just in this window. It's not going to tint this on your final texture out here or anything like that. This color is only for using right here in this window, so you can kind of see things a little bit easier. Now we also need to assign a blit material. So let's go over to the demo folder under materials, and there's a folder called blit materials demo. I've already made 4 materials here for the arms, head, legs, and torso. So for your character, you can just copy these and create more of them if you need more of them. And all you assign on these is a number 0 through 4. How many layers do you have? And what the layers are how many layers get piled on top of each other in this section in your game. So for example, let me go to the head section, and it has 3 layers. And the reason why is because I have a skin tone option, hair color, and then a tattoo. And I want the skin tone to be drawn first on layer 0, and then layer 1 is going to draw the hair on top of that, and then layer 2 is going to draw tattoos on top of that. In fact, I guess hair should be on top of the tattoos. But either way, that's what a blit material is. It's a very simple material file that has how many layers, and then you assign the texture files here. So if you're creating a character creation system and you have a scene where the player is toggling between various skin tones and various hairs and tattoos, as they change the skin tone and hair and tattoo, you would just be assigning the new texture to these slots here. Okay, so I'm going to go to the head area, and first of all, it says blit area 0 and 1. I'm going to give these a nice name. This is head, and so we're going to assign the material blit head. And then over here we have the legs, and so we have material blit legs. And I'm gonna need areas up here. Over in Photoshop we could see that this is a 512 by 512 image, so it's 256 by 190, 256 by 192 for these remaining 2 areas. So in the blit manager, we need to create a 256 by 192 and say create new area. And I will mention that right now I have the snap set at 16. You could increase it to 32 or whatever you want to. That just makes it snap around so that, you know, if your smallest image is 32 or 64 pixels, you can safely set that and just snap these things right into place real easy. And this area is called the arms. Might as well give it a color, even though it's a pretty useless feature, and assign the blit material arms to that. Now, if we look at the blit manager, we'll notice that these blit areas are not being modified right now. I am getting ready to copy this data over here, and that's what this Save the Blit Manager button's for. But first, we're going to work into here, get everything set up, and then click Save. It's going to move all this data over into the blit areas section. So one more area here, create new area, and this is the chest or torso. Put some color on it, and we'll pick the torso material. And again, those 4 materials right here. The torso has 2 layers. That's for the shirt and necklace. And the jeans, I just put 1. There's just 1 layer for jeans. But on your character, you know, you might need a belt or boots that go over the jean area. And so the head has 3 for the skin tone, hair, and tattoo. And then on the arms, I've done 0 just to show that it works. And but typically on the arms, you know, you're going to have a shirt layer, probably a glove layer, and maybe a wrist bracer slot. But for this tutorial, we got to keep things short and simple. We do have the torso defined, and I can see by looking at the current areas that all of my areas are set up. I've have them moved into the correct spots and given names, and so at this point we're ready to render our character and copy these settings over. So I'm going to say save to Blit Manager, and that's going to move all of that data over here, and we can go ahead and close this. Now you might want to save your scene first and then press play, and if you don't see anything happen, it's probably because this human example is still using his Lambert material. He needs to use the demo character material, and we can see that it's already went into effect, and it's showing all of apologies for the horrible art. I had to get something put together, and I've been programming instead of doing 3D art, but we could see that everything's working here. What we've assigned onto our materials here has rendered to the character. There are 0 layers on the arms, so the arms are just showing the base naked texture. And then on the head we have 3 areas assigned where it has the layer 0, which is this skin tone 01, and then it has on the head it has the hair drawn next, and then the tattoo on top of that. And then if we take a peek at the torso, it has just the shirt with the necklace. We can see the necklace and the shirt there, and so everything is being rendered correctly. Now that code, to render it, it's kind of up to you, and I wrote about this a little bit in the documentation. It explains the Blit editor menu, the Blit manager script, how the Blit material works, and how that equates to Photoshop. You'll notice that with the on the Blit materials, it goes from 0, 1, 2, and it seems backwards, but that is how it is rendered over here in Photoshop. I've set up the same essentially scene where there's the base layer and then Blit material 0, 1, 2 with the skin tone, hair, tattoo, and you'll notice that it's base layer down here, then material 0, 1, 2, and that's why their order seems to be inverted when you look at the inspector. They're being drawn how a Photoshop layer would be drawn. So how it works is, it's just right now, we'll probably change this in the future. This is just an early beta, but right now we're just calling it in the on enable function. So if you go over to the scripts and you pull up the Blit manager script, the code for calling the computation of the render texture, it only happens one time whenever you call this code. So this probably would be moved into a function in your game where the character, the player has changed the look of the character, and you need to recompute that render texture. Then this code would need to be called. So right now that's just in the on enable of the Blit manager, which is set to execute always. So we should see that in the editor view as well as in play mode. However, if I press the Control S for save, we will see that disappear because it's releasing the render texture, and we could bring it back just by pressing the play button, and that on enable is going to run. So that covers the end of the documentation, which is the end of this tutorial. And it is a bit rudimentary right now, but we are working to make it better and add more features. And the first major part of that was getting the Blit manager working with the Blit area editor window. And so we're going to go ahead and release version 1 of this tool and get some feedback and develop it more. Thanks for your support, and we'll see you guys in the next update.